and little wrenches and screwdrivers you'll need to use to attach all the pieces. One thing you want to be extremely careful of at every step of the constructing process is you do not want to over tighten the bolts, because they are steel bolts going on aluminum beams, and aluminum is a very soft metal. So it has the capacity to strip it completely if you over tighten it or tighten a little bit too hard. So here we've got little clips. They give us little zip ties so that we can organize the connections better. Further on in this series, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to print some little components that'll keep all of our wires organized and neat. Sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the background. So all these little screws and bolts will be labeled according to, the instruction manual, or when you need to use them, where you need to use them. I'll lay all that out right now. There are a lot of tiny pieces, so do make sure that you're keeping track of every single little thing. This meeting will also be running until about 4:30 Florida time. And whatever we don't get to today, it will be recorded and kind of fast tracked for next week for you guys to watch, so you don't have to sit there and watch me screw in everything. But I did want you guys to get like the base tips of constructing it, because just these tiny little changes can change the way your prints look completely. It can take them from smooth prints to very rough prints where you can see all the lines of every single layer that was put down, and we don't want that ideally.
Excuse me? Sorry, I was a little late because I had class, but like, Nick, can you name an example of like a small detail that could have drastic effects on the print?
Sure. So one of the first things we'll see, actually one of the first things we're going to go in and do is we're going to just go in and tighten every single connection, every single little bolt and screw that is already there, just to make sure nothing got shaken up during shipment, because something like that where it challenges the stability of the printer will affect how your prints come out. Another thing is like these Z axes that will go up and down right here. They have a tendency to wobble a little bit. They'll turn this way. You might not have them completely straight on. It might be a little bit tilted. All of that can sacrifice those beautiful smooth prints. So it's important to go really slow at the beginning and make sure all these tiny details are there. I'm just going to take this off for now.
Thank you. Another thing is, do you mind if someone is able to record these for in the near future, whenever I could actually like go back and review?
Yes, definitely. So we will be recording today's session, and I will put it in an accessible place for you, or I will email it to you all through the MagLab list, and you'll have access to every single recording that we do here.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So now I'm going to go through with the little keys. I'm going to sit down. These can feel like particularly long steps at times, but trust me, it is worth it when it comes to your final print. And troubleshooting, because if something as simple as this axis is tilted this way or it's rotated a little bit, oftentimes you might not be able to just take off that one piece and fix it. You might have to break down a lot more components of the printer to go back and fix something like that.
Is there a way to prevent the axes from tilting, or is that just kind of like part of like the quality of the printer you buy?
So if you secure them properly, they should not move within like your first few months of printing. I'm sure over time there'll be small adjustments, but as long as you get them in really good initially, you shouldn't run into those problems.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over very carefully, because we really don't want to damage the print bed. If your print bed is slightly warped, then it can make the bottom of your print slightly warped as well. So I'm just going to go in, make sure everything is tight. Might take you a few tries to find out which keys fit what holes, but everything seems to be very good and very tight, which has not always been the case for me with my 3D printer, so that is a really good sign. Okay, these ones are attached. I'm sure these are good. While you're checking all these screws, remember you do not want to over tighten them. If they feel good and they feel sturdy, don't push them. All right, so another very important, detail of constructing this base is, let's see if I can move this elsewhere really quickly.
Nikki,
Out of the way.
we
Sure.
we have a question. So
Sure.
someone wants to know, like, how do you know when, like, how tight is tight enough when you're screwing it in?
I mean, your typical resistance, sorry, I'm like screwing it back here. If you can't push it anymore, like that's where it stops turning, that's where you should stop turning. If you have to add any additional force to it, you're likely turning it too far or using too much power behind that turn.
So basically just don't try to force it.
Yeah, if they feel good, see, these are like tight. I would have to give it a little bit of a give to unscrew it, but I can't go any further with it, if that makes any sense. So like I was saying before, something really important that you have to look at is how well it slides along this rail. You see these, we have these four little, here's one, and here's 2, 3, and the other one is behind this. We need to make sure that it slides smoothly. It should not give too much resistance behind it. So we're gonna go in and just adjust it with one of the little wrenches. Right, so it's all, I know it may seem a little bit difficult to tell you guys you should know how smooth it should slide when you haven't really touched a 3D printer before, but you will know if there's any kind of pushback, you need to loosen it a little bit. If it's sliding too freely, it's going to affect the control of the printing. So there, I just tightened one a little bit. This part is a little bit difficult because you do need to reposition and position to get underneath it. How these bolts work though is, see we have like a head over here. The more you turn it, the more the head will kind of deviate from the center. And it's not so much tightening as it is we're moving them out and in from the rail. Cannot get a hold of that one for some reason. Oh, this one does not have a tightening mechanism. So on this printer, only these two have the tightening mechanisms. Just something to know, all printers come a little bit differently from this company. So it looks like we're sliding good now. There's a little bit of resistance, but it's going pretty smoothly, sorry. So after this is complete, we are gonna flip it back over and we're gonna start talking about the supports a little bit more. All right. We're also going to just check, make sure all of our connections look good. Like I said, if you see any wires that look like they've been chopped, that is a problem you need to fix early on. All of our connections are looking really good. They're looking all complete. All the wires look good. You're going to want to check these like white little heads too, because oftentimes they can get bent during shipment. You just never know what the mail carrier is going to be doing with your printer on its way here. So we can go ahead and flip this over. Now, um, if you guys can remember, if not, I can just give you a little side preview really quickly. But on the side here, next to those little bolts that we just adjusted, we have these big knobs. And that is going to adjust the leveling of your printer bed to make sure everything is consistent. You want to make sure when your extruder gives the filament, you want to make sure it's the same thickness. All your layers are going to come even, and that's going to help get you that smooth print that you really want. So we're going to go ahead and tighten them all the way so that the spring is the most compressed it can be. And they have these knobs on all four sides here. So screwing in as tight as it can go.
So right now we're just tightening them as much as we can.
Yes, we're going to be tightening them as much as we can, and then we're going to undo them about 2 rotations counterclockwise.
Okay.
And what does that
Sorry, that
change?
might be clockwise for you.
What does that
So
change?
this
in
will change
overall
the
print?
leveling.
Okay,
In the overall printer, yeah, sorry. So this printer is sitting, I just turned it. I can just flip it over really quick. This printer is sitting on 4 knobs right here, right? And these knobs are sitting on springs. Those springs, you can tighten them. So when they're, expanded, you have like a higher print surface. When they're compressed, you have a lower print surface. And with that, you can adjust each of the 4 corners to get yourself that completely leveled surface. And I've got tiny little levels to try that. But if you aren't trusting that you can get that bed completely level right now, don't worry about it, because we're going to be doing the bed leveling as soon as the printer is completely set up. We're just trying to get it to a good baseline right now. So again, what I'm doing is I'm tightening them all the way, making sure the spring is the most compressed, and then I'm going to undo them about 2 rotations. All right. Another thing we want to look at before we start doing the big construction pieces is over here. We have a little power box that houses all of our major wiring and connections. I'll kind of hold it up at an angle so you can see. Here's like the little barcode and everything like that. You want to make sure that during shipping, the lip of this box did not come over onto your rail, because that will prohibit your Z-axes from standing completely straight like you need them to. So mine looks all good over here, but you never know what happens during shipping, as I said before. So after you check all those things, we can go ahead and we can start assembling the frame. That'll be our first step. So I'm just going to put all of my small components together, make sure they don't get lost. All my tools together. Fortunately, if you do end up losing one little bolt or one little screw, they're very easy to replace by one trip to the hardware store. So nothing to freak out about. So to do this support building, I have learned a few tips and tricks from assembling some other printers that they won't always show you, that'll just help you get a better measurement sooner than later, and better positioning sooner than later, with less adjusting having to be done. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna unwrap these supports here. And these are gonna be the larger of the 2 metal aluminum supports. This is fighting with me a little bit. And we have this was also inside one of the aluminum tubes, but we're not going to worry about that for right now. It's will just look like a black stick at first, but when you pull it out, it actually is a lubricated rod in which the motor will be able to slide up and down on for our prints. So orientation of these rods is very, very important. You do not want to spend time putting them on the wrong way and then having to unscrew them and put them on the right way and losing all that time. These ones are not quite oriented the same as what I'm used to, but basically, they should both look like this. I will double check that with the instructions, but typically your printer rods will look like this, where you'll have two little holes on them and these shorter gaps. See, there's a little bit of longer gap here from this hole to this end and from this hole to this end. This shorter gap is going to go on the bottom of the printer. Give me one quick second to locate that little instruction pamphlet. Make sure everything is good. They didn't send us any wrong pieces. Okay. So for this Creality Ender 3 Pro, they did change this one axis to only have the two holes at the bottom. So the orientation we have it now is correct. The holes, the double holes here at the bottom should be on the bottom of this side that holds your wiring casing. So just flip it up so you guys can see again. It's that side with the barcode on it in the little metal box. We'll get that prepared for this side, and this one's all set for this side. Now what I like to do is I like to flip the 3D printer onto its side like so and attach the supports this way because it gives you a much better chance of getting that perfect upright position. So the screws we will need for this step are called M5 by 45. So we'll just go locate that. All right, M5 by 45. I'm just gonna tip this back over really quickly. It's a little bit unstable while I undo the screws. So here we'll have our screws. They'll come with a little small washer on them. Make sure everything stays together as best as possible. I just want to double check with the instructions, make sure I'm doing everything right. Because like I said, I have assembled these kinds of printers before, but each model is a little bit different. So we just want to make sure everything is consistent and is done right. So what we're going to do is on the bottom of these little posts, you'll see there are two little holes, two tiny little holes, and that's where we will be inserting the screw into from the back of the base. So if I flip it up here, I put this on, and we're going to want them to go sideways like so. Just make sure that orientation is correct. It should match up with the rails on the bottom. And there should be tiny little screw holes at the bottom here for you to be able to insert screws. Make sure it's being accepted by the base. Give them a little, just a little bit of baby tighten. You don't want to tighten them too tight because again, we're going to have to rotate them, adjust them, make sure everything is good. So once that is there, your printer should stand a little bit by itself. We can go ahead and do the other side. So again, you can go ahead and just poke those little screws through, see exactly where it needs to match up with, and tighten by hand for now, or for this step at least. Another thing I like to really do that they won't always talk to you about in the instruction manual or in videos is I like to take one of these smaller rods, our X-axis rods. This is kind of just setting yourself up to minimize those errors. So I'll take one of these rods and I'll match them up right here. I'll put it as close as I can to both of them as possible to make sure we have it's going to be the same going up and down. A few things to keep in mind is we're going to be measuring the distance between both rods. We're going to be seeing how much they rotate. This step right here will ensure that they are not curved inward because they have to match the flat side of this beam. Again, you know, you might get it on your first try, you might get it on your second try, it might take you a little bit longer, but getting these parameters and these specifications set perfectly early or as close to perfect as possible will help you in your printing. All right. Now I'm going to flip the printer upside right. And I'm going to actually do some more tightening on this side. See, it's a little bit wobbly.
Nikki, so say if you
Sure.
don't get the parameters perfectly right the first time, is it possible to go back and fix your errors afterwards?
Something like this will be a little bit challenging to fix, especially with these supports, because you will have, you know, your motor connected. You're going to have like I was talking about, this little rod that it will run on, kind of sit right here. Everything will be so interconnected that it will be a little bit difficult to go back and fix those components, but by no means is it impossible.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. I just want to make sure I get the right key for this and the screw. All right. I'm just going to flip it onto its other side so I can tighten this rod because it's a little bit difficult from this angle. And you might find that, you know, it's a bit difficult assembling from certain angles. Feel free to flip it over, but very carefully, please, because damaging something, it might be easy to replace, it might not be easy to replace, but if we can avoid it altogether, we will. So I'll put this rod back, make sure I have a straight line. I'll go ahead and tighten them. I don't want them crazy tight because we need to adjust them. So now that this side is a little bit more secure, I'm just going to take this rod and I'm going to run it all the way up. it looks like neither of these are twisted. So that is a really good sign. I'm going to go ahead and secure them further now that we know that the posts are not turned. And then we can get on with the measuring between the two posts, because more often than not, you'll have a little bit of a deviation. And just the slightest, tightening of one of these bolts can throw off the top end with no trouble at all. So things to be wary of, definitely. All right, so they are a little bit more tightened now. It's stable. If your table is not completely level, this is a step where, see, I don't know if you guys can hear it, but it is wobbling. You can see it wobbles a little bit. We'll need to loosen one of these posts just so it's flush with the table, and then retighten it from there. So now I'm going to take a tape measure from this little box over here. And we're just going to go ahead and measure each end. So at the top, I've got just under 13 inches. At the bottom, we've got just under 13 inches. Wow. This is the first time I've ever built one of these printers, and it has been even on both sides, you guys. This is something to celebrate. It's perfect. Awesome. So we can go ahead and tighten some more till they're finally tightened, and we can move on to the next step. So just tilting it, tightening those connections until they don't really have a give anymore. All right. So now that we've made sure the supports are even, so just a recap of what we did for these supports is we lined it up with this x-axis bar. We made sure that it was the same going all the way up and down. None of these are twisted or tilted in any way. We measured between the two posts, and we measured just under 13 inches from top to bottom. And it should be, I mean, even if it's 2 millimeters off, it needs to be looked at. So just make note of that. So now we're gonna go to the next step, which is honestly one of the toughest parts in my opinion, because this is one of those things that's almost integral to the printer running, and we're gonna make sure all these wheels run smoothly down the track. And something that you should use as kind of like a baseline marker is gravity should be able to take these wheeled carts all the way down without you having to push them. If they stay there, they need to be loosened, definitely. And if they fall too quickly, tightened a little bit. We're just gonna try sliding it on the tracks. Actually, I'm not sure if that one will slide on that track because it's meant for the smaller one. So we'll find our two little cars. All right, so this one, we're gonna do the test. Just gonna hold my hand at the bottom. It's falling a little bit too quickly, right? So now we're just gonna take at the bottom of one of them, you can adjust one of them. It has one of these bolts that you can just hit this with the wrench with and tighten it a little bit more. Like I said, these screws actually don't tighten. They move to and from the center of the beam. So we'll try this again. Now it's not falling by itself at all, which means we need to loosen it a little bit more. Too much. All right, that's what the motion should, that's the goal motion. It's kind of like a nice slow falling. You guys can see that. So this one is ready. Next, we're gonna go in with this. You will maybe have to orient it a few times to get it completely right. So we can see this one is so tight that it won't even make it on completely. So we're gonna take this side with the stepper motor on it, and we're gonna loosen it just a little bit. Sometimes it helps to adjust while you're on the beam, so you know exactly how much to go or to stop. This one needs quite a bit of loosening. Okay, now we have it on. This one will fall a little bit faster just because it's got the weight of the motor and the little sensor over here. So just make note of that. It definitely will not fall as slow and smooth as the other piece. That is kind of where we want it. We do this because over time, these tiny little wheels, they'll get grooves in them because of the aluminum bar, and we eventually just don't want it to deteriorate or, you know, make the groove so deep that it affects your print one day. So both of those things are have been adjusted. We check that, we check the rails. Now we can do something a little bit more simple, and we can attach our LCD screen to it, and we can also attach our power supply. So without these two things, this printer does not run. So very important to keep them safe, to keep them in one spot, make sure they do not drop from your table. Everything is pretty easy, like I said, to replace either by a trip to the hardware store or by hopping on eBay or the Creality website and ordering a replacement. Generally, it's not, like I said, definitely not impossible, no matter what piece gets compromised. So let's just check really quick on the manual what screws we need. So for the LCD screen, we're gonna need 2 M5x8 screws. So we'll look in our little screw pile. We said we need M5x8. M5x8 is here, and then for the power supply, we're gonna need M4x20s. So I'm gonna go ahead and move that all the way to the back side. Just make sure our orientation is correct. So the computer will go on the side that you see this big metal box, and this will hold a little belt that will help the 3D printer plate slide back and forth. So just make note of that. If you put it on the back side, it's not very hard to change, but just make sure if you can eliminate that time spent doing that, why not? So like I said, on all the aluminum beams, they've got like tiny little holes inside. This. The same thing happens on the bottom post. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take those M5x8s, little stubby ones. I'm gonna take 2 of them, and we're gonna secure the computer or the LCD screen that controls the computer to the post. You'll notice it has 2 tiny little holes for you to unscrew, to screw and unscrew to the base. It's a little bit fighting me just a tiny bit because it's such a short screw. Let me try putting it on with one of the tools. And just go ahead and screw that in all the way. There's nothing else on that step that we need to fix or wait for. So make sure all the screws are tightened to the point where there's no more give, but not over tightened once again. So now our computer is on, it's secured on there, it's not wobbly in the slightest, and we can move on to securing the power supply now. So the power supply will have 4 little screw holes for you to secure it with, and you're going to want to make sure this plug side goes outside. It will go behind on the same side as the little LCD screen. I'll just lay it down while I get the screws ready. These 2 large holes on the side that we were talking about before with the large gap and the small gap are going to be what you will put the screw through to secure that power supply in. Want to make sure everything lines up properly. These connections will need to be tucked a little bit. Let's try securing the first one. I can't really get a good view of that bottom connection. Something to note, I would definitely go about screwing in the top screw first here because it is slightly off of that bottom base. I can slide my hand right under there. And then go ahead with the other one. Make sure they're both tight, but not over tight. And now your power source and your LCD screen are set in place and you're ready to move to the next step. All right. So even though I've been giving you guys a little bit of like tips and tricks and we flipped it over to put the beams on, we are following the instruction manual step by step. I'm just adding a few things to help with future problems so you guys don't run into them. Now we're going to take piece 9. Looks like piece 9 is this one. Has a little clicker, has the motor. Oh no, sorry, piece 9 will be a covering. Still in there. Find it. Does anybody have any questions so far? And any of the things I've done, I'd be happy to answer anything, even if it's a question about step one. Either feel free to unmute yourself or drop it in the chat. All right, we have some more tiny little pieces. Some of the stuff will come apart. For example, this little nut and bolt did, just belongs to this piece right over here. I'm just re-securing it really quickly just so we don't lose any of the pieces. So now we will be attaching this piece right over here. It looks like a tiny little L. I'll take it out of the package so you can see it a little bit better.
Can you show it a little bit closer to the camera?
Yeah, I was just taking it out of the bag so I can give a better view for it. So on one side it looks like this, on the other side it looks like this. And this will be going on the opposite side of your LCD monitor. And the orientation is going to be these two screws, these two screws will be at the top and this will be at the side. So it should stand like so. So if you were looking at it like an L, it's just going to be an upside down L. This one already comes with the screws needed to attach on here. You don't need to grab anything from what you're given. So what you're going to do, these ones are a little bit finicky. I'll let you know now. But basically, you're going to unscrew them so they're a little bit loose. And then they perfectly actually fit into the little grooves of the rails here. And then you'll go ahead and tighten it once you get to the bottom from the other side. You don't unscrew them too much or they'll fall off. Make sure they get perfectly inside that groove. You can slide it down all the way to the bottom. Grab your Allen key and tighten. Declutter some of this stuff. You want to make sure it's completely straight. It will want to go down on there a little bit curved or a little bit slanted. You want to make sure it's as straight as possible because it holds, I don't know if you guys can hear that, one of those sensors that'll tell it when to stop and when to start. So after that piece has been secured, we can go ahead and secure the rod in which the motor will travel on, up and down and to the side and to the side. So this piece, like I said, it is pre-lubricated with a little bit of like oil so that it slides down with no issues, doesn't get stuck or jammed on anything. So we're going to be taking this tiny little independent stepper motor and we're going to be putting them together. For that, we'll need 2 of the M4 by 18 screws. So we'll step over to our little screw pile, find those M4 by 18s. Okay. I'm just gonna adjust this, make sure everything's going right. Always check back with your instructions, even if you're watching a YouTube video or watching me put it together. always make sure everything is being followed along. So what we'll do here, so it looks like this is going to go on this back side on the opposite end of the power supply. And we will be securing it with the two little holes that we saw in the beginning of this post at the, when I was first constructing it. So we'll put it through, we'll put the two screws in. These ones, you might not be able to tighten by hand. Doesn't seem like so. So we'll just get one of the keys. And I just want to screw it in enough that I can see it coming out of the other side so I can guide it into the little holes on here. So once that's in place, I just go ahead and rotate this to make my life a little bit easier. Make sure no connections are in the way. And we're going to go ahead and screw it in. Running into a slight issue here. It seems like these screws are not quite long enough to connect this how it usually is connected. Okay. So we'll try going in from the other angle because we know for sure that they screw into here. They're just not fitting into these holes because they don't have any grooves. Just pop those little screws out. They shouldn't be in too tight because we weren't securing anything. If I have another piece of advice for you is to check and double check again that you're using all the right screws and all the right attachments, because it can become a little bit of a pain in your butt if you misplace them and use the wrong screws on wrong parts, and then your short screws on other parts. So something to definitely keep on top of. So we're going to go from the inside of this motor with the little clicker that you can feel up here. And we're going to stick the screws in to this side. There's two little holes on that little black back piece so that they should stick out like that. Maybe you guys can see that well enough. They should be sticking out of the back like that. And then we can go ahead and secure them. It's sliding me just a little bit. Sometimes it is really difficult to get your hands in there. You're screwing in so many small pieces. You can move the bed back and forth, endlessly while you're constructing it, and it's not going to affect anything. Just make your life a little bit easier. You've got it. The reason that these side components, like the power supply, are a little bit difficult to secure is because they don't sit flat on this bottom rod. You kind of have to lift them up just the slightest bit to get them to match up with the threads. So once we have that tight and secured, we can go ahead and put the rod down in it. Sure nothing's attached to that rod. And make sure that it spins without an issue while it's on here. This will be further secured by the X-axis bar that we will install. So we have been going for about an hour already. I will give you guys a 5-minute bathroom break if you want to get up, text your friends, get a snack, because we will be here for another 30 minutes. So I'll let you guys go for the next 5, and then we'll check back in and we'll continue the build.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We're gonna complete one more step before wrapping up and summarizing everything we've done, talking about it, answering any questions, and next week we will resume the build. But we're about to give you a rough idea. We're gonna be about halfway through after this step. So for this step, this is step number 5, and we're gonna be taking one of our x-axis rods. We're gonna be taking this big chunky cart for the axes, sorry. And we're gonna be attaching it with the M 4x16 screws. So we'll locate those again. So we're going to be sliding it on the back of the rod. It says here that the front of the rod is with these larger holes, going to be face down. And we're going to try to put it on. It might take you a few different tries. Like I said, all printers are built differently. I'm not quite sure how that is working. But I actually think that we're going to be sliding this bigger one. I made a mistake onto one of the main rods. Sometimes you will need to go check back in, even for someone like me I've built about 5 of these printers already, different models, but same company. We'll have to go and check and make sure you're getting the right rods because they'll look exactly the same with just one more hole or one last hole. You need to really make sure it's the right one. So we're gonna do, this is rod 18 and it looks like it's this one with these larger carved out holes at the top here. And then on the back, you've got 2 smaller ones on each side. So we're gonna adjust this to be a tiny bit tighter than before. Originally, we tried it on these Z-axes to make sure it fit. Now we gotta make sure it fits the smaller one. So let's see here. Unfortunately, these instructions only come with pictures, not words. So calling all the childhood Lego building skills, you got to put them together, make sure everything's oriented correctly. Okay, so it looks like we're here. We're here. I want to just make sure everything's going smoothly before I give you guys any more direction. What it looks like to me is that this piece will be sliding in like so. Although it's not sliding in the easiest at the moment. Bear with me 1 second, you guys. I apologize for this small delay.
Take your time.
It seems to me that the orientation of this cart is different than is described on the instruction manual. So that might mean it can mean two things. One, we can continue building with no problem, or two, we might need to disassemble this cart and reassemble it properly. That is something I will have to look into a little bit further. So a little bit of an unanticipated speed bump we have here. So we will actually leave off there, and I'll go through and we can talk about everything that we've done today. And then the next time I see you guys, the next time you see me, I will answer the question whether we had to break this down and reassemble it the way it looks on the instructions, or we were able to make it work the way it was sent to us. So in review, some of the things that we did, so we unboxed it, we put all the parts out, we made sure we had everything that was on the instructions. We went through and we tightened all the connections and the screws on all like the base parts and pieces. We went through and we made sure that all the connections were good, they were stable, none were severed during shipment. We then tilted everything on its base on the side to be able to put these supports on. To make sure that they weren't twisted, we took one of these x-axis bars and we slid them up and down, made sure it touched the same at the top and the bottom. After that, to further reinforce that we have stable supports, we went through and we measured from end to end, and we saw that it is just 1 millimeter under 13 at the top and at the bottom. After that, we went through and we attached our LCD screen with these two little screws. We attached our power supply, ensuring that the plug-in connection is facing towards the outside so we can plug it into the wall with no issue and it won't interfere with any of the bed movements. We also, to jump back a little bit, sorry about that, we adjusted the tiny little the screws under the rails here to make sure it slid forward and back with no issue, with just a small amount of resistance, nothing too tight and nothing too loose. We then went through and we tightened all of these spring knobs to the maximum that they could be tightened, and then we unraveled them about 2 rotations to get us to some sort of baseline for when we do begin leveling the printer bed. After that, we went ahead and attached this little sensor over here. You can hear they have like little clicks on them. And that's, you know, when the axis comes down for the printer, it'll click on that thing, it'll tell it to stop so it doesn't, you know, send your printer shaking and flying everywhere. After that, we attached the little motor in the back here that controls this little axis, and this is what the extruder will slide up and down on. You can see it better once it's in motion, but it twists up and down, and the motor will stay fixed. So depending on where it twists, it'll go up or it'll go down, and that's how it'll handle that z-axis movement. After that, we attempted to see what was going on with this cart. It appears that this cart is not oriented in the same way that it shows on the picture here. So we're going to decide whether we need to break down and reassemble this entire cart by the next session, or if we can make it work with how the cart is oriented already. Likely, when you guys go to build your 3D printers, this won't be an issue. This is like one of those things that's one package is off and it's a small quality control thing that kind of slips under the rug. So you should not have to worry about that. And if anything on your printer kit looks different, or you have any questions, or you're running into any speed bumps at any point when you're putting it together yourself, please feel free to send a message in the group me, send some pictures. I'll be more than happy to troubleshoot things with you guys and make sure that everything is going smoothly and you guys can get printing as soon as possible. So next week we will finish building the rest of the printer, and then the week after that we will start our 3D modeling in a software called Fusion 360. And I'll get you guys set up with the software before we come into the meeting so that you won't have to waste any time downloading. And within another 2 weeks, you'll be printing your first project and building it yourself. So Hope you guys are looking forward to it as much as I am, because these are some skills that I really wish that someone had brought to me when I was in high school. I recently picked up 3D printing as part of an internship, and I realized it is the most incredible ability to be able to think of something and to be able to replicate it, to produce it at like the blink of an eye kind of thing. The printing time is a little bit long, but you know what I mean. And as soon as you think of it, you can put it on a CAD program, you can slice it, and you can send it to your printer, which is very cool in my mind. Another thing is I know that some of the printer kits were lent out to you by Dr. Rama. This system is actually only $200 new. So for, if you guys want to hop on eBay, I got mine. It's a little bit of a more advanced model. I got mine on eBay for almost half off used. So if you guys want to get started by yourselves, it's not limited to what you can get in the classroom or what you can get during this time. If you just put a little bit of money aside, you can do the same thing for yourself at home. I hope that this was a good starting point for you guys to look at what it means to build a 3D printer, the unboxing, what it will start to look like. And if you have any other questions, also, just feel free to reach out at any point. Alrighty. Is there any questions before we end this meeting?
Thank you.
Alrighty, if there isn't.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome. You're very welcome. It was very fun building this alongside you guys this time around. I've never done it on camera, so it's pretty fun. I hope to see you guys next week, and I'll keep you guys posted. I'll email you a summary and the link to this recording as well, so you can watch it back later.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice weekend.
See you next
You
week.
too. Have a good weekend. Bye, guys.
Bye.